Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3Iron and welcome to today's discussion where I'm just trying to articulate and put into some words some of the feeling that I've got, almost a meta discussion about the meta around Path of Exile discussions. Here's the too long didn't watch thesis of today's discussions. It seems to be that Path of Exile used to primarily focus in conversations and in discussions on Reddit, on Twitch, on YouTube, on the forums. Discussions about Path of Exile were, for the most part, if you were just grabbing a random sampling of discussions, most discussions seem to be about character builds, right? That used to be seemingly the thing that got the most views on YouTube, it got the most attention on Twitch, and it would oftentimes garner the most controversy on various forums and discussion threads, text-based conversations about Path of Exile. Players would want to talk about their characters, other players then would want to clarify, how do I make my character more like your character? Tools were developed throughout the course of the history of Path of Exile to help players better facilitate both the creation of their characters and facilitate discussion about their characters. Tools like Path of Building or Craft of Exile, all sorts of things, whole Discord servers set up to discourse and to discuss all of these sorts of aspects of playing Path of Exile through the lens and perspective of characters. And then throughout the last maybe 6 years or so, probably since just after Fall of Oriath, things have changed a little bit. I'm sorry, did I say Fall of Oriath? I mean the introduction of Oriath and then subsequently the Fall of Oriath and introduction of Cirrus. Things have changed a little bit with scarabs and with targeted content that we can now enjoy together as players. What I'm going to do here in just a moment is I'm going to show you just a small smattering of discussions from some Reddit and from some YouTube. This is a different conversation today. I am not presenting any of this information today as scientific data with hard data facts like I oftentimes do when we're discussing the meta around players. I'm just throwing out a smattering of stuff and going, this is kind of how I feel where we're at in 2024 in 324 Necropolis League as a community and where discussions are primarily focused around. It used to be that we'd chat about characters, how to take down top-end bosses, but as things kind of have changed over the last several years, and we as players have been further empowered to choose the content that we want to interact with, and specifically to choose the league content that we want to interact with, more and more discussions have emerged about what content is best. What content is best for XP farming? What content is best for pure divination card drops? What content is best for magic find? What content is best for group play? What content is best for players? Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not making any sort of claim today that those discussions haven't always existed in Path of Exile. They always have. But in general, most people interacting and discussing, or maybe not even most, but a large chunk of community discussion was around characters, was around which ascendancy classes were best, which allowed for the most flexibility of play, which sorts of build archetypes seemed to be the most broken and the most powerful approaches to playing Path of Exile. And while that's still a niche, that's still a big part, I don't even want to say like niche, like small part. That's still a big part of the overall conversation and community aspects of Path of Exile. I think there's a larger, more emerging trend that we are seeing presently, and maybe I'm just now noticing it, and maybe it's always been here, but I at least have words to put it into today. Nowadays, more discussions are around the Atlas tree, or it feels that way. More discussions are about the Atlas tree than they are about characters. And that can tie into all sorts of other things. I think one of the byproducts of this, or one of the factors of this, is players are playing Path of Exile maybe more than ever and enjoying their characters more than ever. And we as a community have gotten better at communicating and helping each other build out characters and fill out character trees and fill in all the niches and the details for defensive layers of this and offensive outputs and tricks for that. Like, we've gotten better at building characters together as a community and helping one another build characters together. There's tons of content creators out there who help players through their builds, who make awesome build guides that are super detailed. Path of Building exists, and players are getting more proficient at building chef's kiss, just beautiful Path of Buildings and sharing those together with leveling trees and all sorts of those things. So it almost feels like as a community, we are maturing to the point where we no longer need to be discussing exactly, all of the intricacies of character builds. And now more and more players are discussing the intricacies of the Atlas tree. The Atlas tree is the new thing, targeted specific content that we can shape and that we can craft in such a way that it's like building another character. That's really what it feels like at the moment. And I finally got the words to figure this out the other day while I was playing and interacting with somebody who had some questions about Atlas trees and passives and characters. And kind of their question was, what are the best combinations of content? Like, are there sorts of combinations of content that are better than others? Just like how when you're building a character, there are combinations of ascendancies and skills that make sense. Well, the same thing is true on the Atlas. Are there certain styles of content that make sense to double up with or to pair with other styles of content? I thought that was a great question. It was a great question about the Atlas tree, and it was using some language that was familiar enough, talking about characters and how things mesh together. And I think it's just dead on. It's a dead on question, like how do you combine things and how do you choose the content that you want to play? For some players on the Atlas tree, we're just going to choose to play things that we enjoy playing, that we have fun playing. Other players are looking to min-max, whether that min-max is experience, whether that min-max is speed of maps, whether that's min-max in terms of divs per hour. We are in kind of a new era of meta discussions inside Path of Exile. We've kind of graduated as a community from discussing all of the intricacies of character builds because there's a template there. There's an approach there. Players know how to recognize, for the most part, maybe not for the most part, but there's a much greater awareness now in 2024 than there was even prior to Delirium in 2020. There's a massive amount of community knowledge and awareness of the sorts of tools that are being used. Like, when was the last time you ever had somebody ask you, hey, how do I download Path of Building and how do I use it? Used to get that comment all the time on YouTube, on Twitch, on Reddit, on the forums. Used to see that all over. Hey, how do I download that? Hey, how do I use that? Hey, how do I update Path of Building? Now Path of Building is just like an assumed extension, right? You used to get kind of like strange responses from people like, oh, like I should have to go and download a third-party program to play Path of Exile? Like, what kind of weird world is this that you would assume I would be able to do that? Or like for trade, for instance, or Path of PoE Ninja, right? Oh, who has a second monitor to be able to look at like a trade website or have trade live listings listed? Like those sorts of discussions, that's a thing of the past. Players now either, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because Gen Zers are playing Path of Exile now. I don't know if it's because millennials are, I don't know, just more in tune with third-party programs and being available to it. I don't know if there's just a massive number of people who bought a second screen during COVID. I don't know. My point is that presently there's more and more discussions around the Atlas tree than there are around character builds. There's still a ton of conversations about character builds. There's probably not more conversations overall about Atlas trees than discussions about characters. It just feels that way. It feels like that's kind of like the emerging trend for all of us together as a community in Path of Exile. So here's just a smattering of stuff. So here's, of course, Fubgun, which, Fubgun is... I misspelled it, didn't I? Oh, no, I correctly spelled it. Anyway, Fubgun does tons of stuff where he, just trying to produce the most amount of drops possible. Tons of videos on this, primarily discussing Atlas strategies, not primarily discussing the character that you need, the passives that you need, the jewels that you need, the unique items that you need for a character, primarily discussing Atlas trees, right? That's one particular outlet. Almost 20,000 subscribers on YouTube, bunch of subscribers over on Twitch, pretty big name in the community. Of course, Grimro, massive name in the community, 80,000 subs on YouTube, tons of subs over on Twitch as well. So happy that Grimro is back and playing. Much of the discussions that Grimro hosts are about the economy. They've always been that way, right? But presently, more and more of the discussions that are being hosted, you can go over and watch on Twitch as well. By the way, all of these other content creators and hosts are linked down below in the video description. So everybody gets, credit for all the work that they've done. And if you want to watch any of these folks and their awesome content, you can click on the links down below. But the content and the discussions that are being hosted nowadays are less about, okay, how much item quant do I need to make this particular map farming strategy viable versus what does my Atlas tree actually need to look like? The value that players are now placing on not just completing the campaign and rushing maps. It used to be, okay, I want to rush maps and get to my watchstones. Now it's, I want to finish my Atlas so that way I have a full Atlas tree to play with, right? It's not necessarily about mapping. It's not necessarily even about map sustain. It's more about how can I get as many passive points as possible onto the Atlas so that way I can really start playing my second character. My first character is my character that I build out to take on content. But my second character that I build is my Atlas tree, which really is picking and choosing the content that I want to play. And that's kind of where we're at right now. You can look, if you just do a Path of Exile search on YouTube, you can just search through and look through. There's a whole bunch of discussions about different build guides that are being played, different sorts of things that are being suggested in terms of builds. But then there's also, this is somebody, here you go, Path of Evening, hit level 100 fast in Necropolis League, 200 million XP per hour, with discussion about scarabs and Atlas trees. Anyway, just tons of different things. There's build discussions. Point is this is an emerging aspect of our discussions. Here's another one, Crumble PoE. I turned Path of Exile into a running simulator and made a mirror in less than 24 hours of gameplay. I don't know why this doesn't have like a billion views on it. I would think that it would, but anyway, it's only got 15,000 views. What's one of the primary things that he's going to discuss? The Atlas strategy. How to be able to produce the amount of currency that he's producing. You need an Atlas strategy. So not a character, but an Atlas tree to be able to produce the results that it can produce. Okay, here is the Path of Exile builds subreddit. Okay, this subreddit is dedicated. It's a wonderful subreddit, by the way. Highly recommend you check it out if you've never checked it out. This is a subreddit that is entirely dedicated to discussions about Path of Exile builds, right? So here's the welcome info. If you need help with a build you are working on, if you want to look for inspiration for a new character, or if you simply want to share something you've been working on, then you're in the right place. This is not the general Path of Exile, subreddit. This is more specifically tuned for builds. Well, there's a ton of discussions happening on this particular platform that are about the Atlas tree, right? Here's a discussion from a day ago. Currently viable strats and farms. Here's just a list. Look at this list. Okay, this, again, all of these are linked down below if you want to look at them. I'm not going to go through everything here. I don't want this to be a 40-minute video or something. But this is a discussion that's going on right now. How many comments? 83 comments, which, yes, I know for large Reddit threads, that's not going to sound a lot. But that's a good amount of comments for the Path of Exile build subreddit in terms of number of players engaging and commenting. And look at this. Here's a compilation of 38 different currently what's called viable strats or farms. Now, I'm not going to argue here what's viable, what's not, what's fun, what's not, etc. But just take a look. Like 38 different ways to play your Atlas. That kind of sounds like 38 different builds, right? If we go over and we look at PoE Ninja, for instance, right? Are there 38 different builds right now that are super popular, right? When we're looking at the latest snapshot on Necropolis, we'd go, okay, well, Necropolis, 93,000 plus characters, Hexblast characters, Lightning Arrow characters, Ice Nova Frostbolt characters, Righteous Fire characters. Fire Trap is used generally with Righteous Fire, so that's not a second character. Splitting Steel gets used by Splitting Steel characters, but also sometimes it gets used by, by folks that are running the build I'm running. Holy Relic of Conviction. Anyway, just a whole bunch of builds. Cyclone, that can be a whole million builds that are out there that are linked to Cyclone. Detonate Dead, that was like the meta build of the league. That's dropped down quite a bit. About 5% are playing it, whether it's in its alternate form or if it's just in a base bold, boring old Detonate Dead. Anyway, this is not to say that there's not more than 38 builds that are out there. There are, and remember, these are only characters level 90 through 100. So there's lots of different builds and lots of different archetypes. This is not me complaining saying we need more build archetypes or more skill gems. This is just me saying, look at this. There's 38 different strategies right here just in this one thread. There's more than that, and there's more yet to come. Each one of these has been something that has pretty much come out over the last couple of weeks here with 324, and players have gone, wow, this is really, really profitable. You should be running this. So right now we're at a spot, going back to my original thesis, where yes, there are a ton of discussions that are still ongoing about character builds, but now there's even more than ever discussions that are going on around Atlas trees. And I'll round it out here just with these last couple. Here's another discussion. Currently viable low-income investment strategies. This used to basically be verbatim a post that would get posted from players asking about low investment characters that you could build. What's a low investment character that I can build? Hey, I'm league starting late. How can I get in with a low amount of currency and with a character that's cheap and start playing? Okay, that's the discussion about characters, but now you can take all of those discussions about characters and just apply them to the Atlas tree, and that's kind of where we're at. The Atlas tree has basically allowed us to have 2 characters at the same time, but really 4, right? Because if you've got your Watchstones unlocked and you got the passives unlocked, then you got 3 extra Atlas trees that you can play with and interact with your character. I mean, it really is brilliant that we not only have characters that we can play with and play around with and mess around with and have multiple iterations and multiple ways to play Path of Exile, but now we've got multiple ways to play the content that we want to engage in and that we want to define as fun and enjoyable. It's just brilliant. Here's another one. Tier 17 farming that isn't back to basics Scarab, right? Title basically. All the popular T17 farming strats I see are back to basics Scarab and increase explicit modifiers. What are the other strategies? Here's 21 comments in this particular thread discussing it, right? There are, again, verbatim, you could see this same post. Hey, what are the strategies that aren't detonate dead? Right? Or hey, what are the strategies that aren't lightning arrow? Or hey, what are the builds that are good that are not poison SRS this league? Or hey, what are the good builds going all the way back to incursion? What builds out there are good that are not triple elemental herald conversion elementalists, right? Like every conversation pretty much that you could have about characters in Path of Exile, you can now have in Path of Exile, but make it about the Atlas tree itself. Here's the last one. Farming strats without tier 17. Okay, so I can't push tier 17, or I don't want to push tier 17, or it's too expensive, or whatever. How can I still be making currency? Tons of players would make, again, similar sorts of discussions and say, hey, my character, I don't want to go and boss. What is a good build that I could play without bossing? Or hey, I don't like mapping, I just want to boss. What's a good character for that? Or hey, I just want a low-level blast and chill. Or hey, I want to play a build that doesn't require me to press a lot of buttons, etc. All of the conversation points that players have been pointing to for years, asking questions and building community around, that have been good questions about characters, now can be asked, and asked with a high level of conviction because of the awesome tools that we have available through the Atlas tree. Anyway, that's my opinion. I'm really not even sharing an opinion, more of an observation. I'm just finally putting into words something that I've been starting to feel as I've come back to Path of Exile and played Trade League. It is an absolute blast because now more than ever, you can choose the style of content that you want to interact with in Path of Exile. And overall, I think that's a good thing. Anyway, drop me a comment down below. I'll respond as time allows. Thanks so much for watching. And I hope today is the day a Mirror of Calandra drops for you while you're farming whatever Atlas strategy you enjoy.
Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.